G'day folks, I'm excited. I've got a trip coming up. This is a major trip and it's something that I've been planning for the past 6 months. I've been planning the route, I've been getting all the permits, I've been doing all the things that are required before doing a major trip. And I'm not going to say where it's to just yet, but it is to a very remote part of Australia, and this will be a huge trip. It'll be at least 10,000 kilometres. We'll be gone for a month, and you need to prepare accordingly. So I've been, apart from all the planning and preparing, I've been working on the car, trying to get the car ready for such a trip. So let's go through and have a look at all the things that I've done to the car. So the first thing I changed on the car was the tyres. Now, the previous 2 times I've gone with the BF Goodrich all-terrain KO2 tyres, and each time I've changed them at about 80 to 90,000 kilometres. Each time it was changed ahead of time because I was embarking upon a trip and wanted a fresh set of tyres. And I've had such good performance out of these tyres that this time is no different. I probably could have gotten another 20 to 30 Ks out of them, but I've gone with the BF Goodrich all-terrain KO2s yet again. They are just a fantastic tyre and I've been very, very happy with them. And I'm going to do about 10 to 12,000 Ks at least on this trip, so new set of tyres, it just makes sense. Okay, so these spotlights have been on the car for about 8 years. This one, nothing wrong with it at all. This one, it keeps on coming loose. And every time I go underneath there and tighten it, and after some time on corrugations, it still comes loose. So I'll keep an eye on it over the next few weeks before the trip, and if it looks like it's going to shake itself loose again, I'm going to have to try and find a solution, either try and find a spring washer or a nylock nut, or at the very least get some thread lock on there and put the existing nut back on and try it and tighten it, and hopefully that will keep it in place. Mobile phone signal booster. The problem I've had with this is that it keeps on coming loose. I keep on tightening it and every time it keeps on coming loose, no matter how much I tighten it. Now, I can't solve this by simply putting on a nylock nut or a compression washer, because I've got the actual coax cable threaded through the nut that came with it, and I can't actually take this off and put another one on because of that cable. And I don't want to cut the cable, because every time you cut a cable and join it up again, you're introducing a loss. So I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to solve this, but I have to keep on tightening this every time, and maybe it's just a matter of getting out regularly and checking it every day and tightening it whenever I feel it's going loose. But if you have any ideas of how I can tighten that, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Some modifications to the engine bay. So I have relocated my heat exchanger. The heat exchanger used to be located in this cavity here. I made a custom bracket for it and it was bolted to the engine block using some big long bolts with some nylock on there. And that did a fantastic job. But after a few years and several billion corrugations, the custom bracket started becoming a little bit loose on those bolts. So I thought, it's part of the cooling system, I don't want to risk it. I'm going to remove it and I'm going to fix it to the back wall here. So I made another custom bracket, and actually this is the spot that I would recommend anybody to install their heat exchanger. Fixed to the back wall, and I rerouted all the hoses so that it now nicely goes through the heat exchanger, and that is now really fantastic. The John Guest tubing that I'm using, the blue is for cold, red is for hot, and wherever the tubing is rated to about 80 degrees Celsius, but wherever it's passing in close proximity to the engine, I've actually put radiator tubing around the John Guest tubing. So this is one example right here. So that contains some John gas tubing. You can see a little bit of red in there. So that's going through radiator tubing, and that further insulates it from the heat of the engine. So that I'm very, very happy with now. The other change to my hot water shower system since the original video that I did about it, and if you haven't seen that, I'll put a link to that video in the top corner somewhere. But the other change is that I now am able to route the water in a variety of ways. So I can use the onboard water tank, or I can use an external source like a bucket or a river. Now, if I'm using an external source, I may choose to send that water, instead of going to my shower head, I might choose to send that water back into my water tank. So I've got some T-pieces and taps and things, so I can route the water through my pump, goes through the heat exchanger, but the hot water, I can block off the hot water via a tap down here. So I've only got the cold water flowing through to my shower hose, where I can then divert the water back to my water tank via a filter. So that way, if I want to fill my water tank from a tap, I can connect a tap directly to an outlet right next to my water tank in the car. Or if I want to fill it from an unpressurized source like a bucket or a river, then I can use my shower pump to pump that water through the shower system, but then go through the water filter back into the tank. So that is a very good modification I've made to that. One of the other changes I've made is I've installed an automatic tyre pressure sensor, and that is this unit right here. This is made by ARB, and I've temporarily cable tied it to some existing hoses here. I need to make a custom bracket for it and mount it in a nicer way, but basically what this does is this sits on the output of my air compressor, and it measures the pressure that my air compressor is putting out. And so it's got a Bluetooth capability, and I can pre-program various tyre pressures set into it. So if I'm going to inflate, I just turn it on and it knows to inflate from whatever it's at up until 41 psi, and then it will stop. And the good part about that is I don't need to stop and check my tyre pressures every single time, every few seconds, every 20 seconds. I can just let it go and know that when it gets to the right pressure, it will stop. It will also deflate tyres, so I can say I want to deflate to whatever, 25 psi, 15 psi, whatever I preset, or I can just change it on the fly, and this will take care of inflating or deflating to the right pressure. That works really great, and like I said, that's just mounted pretty ugly, but it's mounted temporarily until I think up how I can create a bracket to house all this properly. Alright, so two changes on this side of the car. I've got this ladder, which has been here for about 2 years now. This is made by Cab, and it is a vast improvement over the cheap Chinese telescopic ladder. The bad thing about the telescopic ladders is that they have very hard edges to the rungs, and when the ladder is tilted, you're actually stepping on this part. This has got nice flat rungs, so when the ladder is at an angle, you've got a nice flat, deep tread to walk on, and is far more comfortable with bare feet. Now the change I made to this is, and this is actually, maybe it's a design flaw with this ladder, is when you walk up and down the ladder, the car can rock a little bit. That's just your suspension at work. So when you're moving around in the tent and the car rocks a little bit, it tends to drag the base of the ladder closer and closer and closer to the car until I find that the tread will actually touch the car. And so I've put on this piece of rubber and riveted that on, so if that does happen, the car is protected. So that's change number one. Change number two is I've installed this light up here. Now this is made by Hardcore. I've then made up this bracket up here, which actually I think turned out really well. It looks like it's part of the actual tent. That bracket comes with the tent. This is one that I've made, and this is the remote control, or the controller that comes with the light. I can turn the light on, and you can see that we've got some orange, white and orange, or just white, and you can obviously vary the intensity of the light to quite bright. And normally I like to have this fairly dim at night, and I generally turn that on just to illuminate the steps, the ladder, and around the area whenever we need to come out of the tent at night or before going into the tent. So that's a really great addition. One of the first modifications I did to the car was to fit the Rhino Rack roof rack, and this is the Rhino Rack backbone system, and I originally had a Pioneer tray which I've then removed and put on the load bars. Now that's been on the car for about 8 years, and after a recent trip to Cape York and about 20 trillion corrugations, metal fatigue finally took its way, and the Rhino Rack here, this part here, got a crack in it, and finally it snapped straight through where the bolt is going there. And so what I ended up doing was just basically putting the bolt back in, taping it up with electrical tape, and I made it up to the tip and all the way back home again. And about 6 months later I ended up replacing the Rhino Rack rails, and that now is good for another 8 years, I'd say. When I replaced the roof rack on the car, I obviously had to remove the tent to do so. And when I put the tent back, I didn't initially put back the LED light bar because I thought, well, maybe I don't need it. Maybe it's extra weight that I don't need up there. I was then offered some floodlights, which I installed, and they were great. But then I decided to add the LED light bar back. And I'm glad I did, because it is a fantastic addition. And so now I've got both the LED light bar and the floodlights installed. Right, around in the back of the car I've added this light here. It also doubles as a paper roll holder, but this light basically turns on. This is made by, I can't remember. I'm sure that you will recognize it. It's a fairly popular light brand, little gooseneck light. So when we're cooking at night or working or something, we've got the option of illuminating exactly what we're making here. Before I close this, the other change is underneath the induction cooktop I've put some vents in. I had some ventilation holes, but it wasn't enough. Not the prettiest job in the world, but it does the job. Before, the cooktop worked for 30-40 minutes and then it kept on turning itself off. And it wasn't the inverter, it was the induction cooktop going into help me mode and saying, I'm overheating, I'm going to turn off. So I've added the ventilation panel underneath, and since then I can use it for however long I've got battery power, and for hours, and it'll be perfectly fine. So that's another addition. One addition that I really love, and this is so simple, fly screen. You can see that I've made a very simple bracket, just a strip of plastic that I've cut long enough so that when I bend it and bolt it into the existing bolt holes, that it then bends to roughly the shape of the roof. That could be a little higher. Now there are gaps on either side, but that is enough to keep the flies and mozzies out. Now you would think that you would need to run the fly net from edge to edge and not have any gaps at all, but turns out flies are stupid and they don't try and crawl around. So this actually works a treat. Ever since we've had it, we've been so surprised that it has kept all the flies and mozzies out of the car. And you can roll it up when you don't need it, or just let it down like that when you do, and it doesn't cause any obstructions looking through the rearview mirror. It's a fantastic addition. Now, I've been to many remote places, and finding a reliable source of fresh water is not always dependable. You can't expect to always be able to fill the car up at a service station when I buy petrol. So in one particular case, I stopped to buy fuel, and it wasn't even that remote. And when I asked them about the water, they said, no, don't even bother. They wouldn't drink it themselves. It's unreliable. Now, I only have a 40-litre water tank in the car, and for one person I can probably get by for the better part of a week, but for two people that won't last longer than a few days, especially if we're having showers. So I am going to need to top up my water tank quite frequently. Now, to improve my chances of getting fresh water into the car, I've already got a carbon filter on the input of the water tank, and that way I was hoping to always be able to have nice clean water end up in the water tank. But you never know. How good is a carbon filter? Will a carbon filter filter everything? The answer is not really. So I've found a product that will hopefully be able to filter everything else that the carbon filter might miss. So that product is called Guzzle H2O. Here it is right here. And basically what this is this is a carbon filter in this part. The water comes in here through this part, through the carbon filter, and then it goes up through this part here. And this is a UV filter. And then it comes here to your drinking tap. Now, the good part about having a UV filter is that will filter any bacteria that's still alive in the water. So with the aid of the existing carbon filter on the way into the tank, this is going to be plumbed into the output of the water tank, where my drinking outlet is in the back of the vehicle. So I've got a second carbon filter here, and then I've got my UV filter there. And with the help of those two filters, that will hopefully allow me to filter absolutely everything out of the water, and I will end up with nice, pure, clean drinking water. So that is what I'm doing today. I'm not going to film the exact installation because this would be different for every vehicle, but I'll show you the end result as soon as I've installed it. And here it is installed. If I was building this car from scratch, I would probably try and put that somewhere a little bit less obvious, but you do need to replace the filter, they say once every 6 months or so. So I can unscrew this filter and I still have enough underneath it to drop it down a bit, remove it, put in a new filter and put this back. So that's actually in a pretty good spot. It's not in the way. It was easy to plumb in, and it's got power to it. There's power behind this board, so it worked really, really well for me. The one thing I haven't done though yet is test it out. So let's have a test. I happen to have here a beautiful, stylish 4X Adventures enamel mug, available on 4xadventures.com.au. So let's go test it out. So you'll notice that the water filter has a green light on it. Now that just means that there's power to the unit, and when I start pumping, a blue light comes on, and that means that the UV filter is active. Okay, so this is the taste test. It looks absolutely clear. Let's see how we go. Oh, that's nice. That tastes clean. That's the only word I can think of. It tastes cleaner and purer than your normal tap water does. I like it. I like it very much. So the water, remember, the water is going through 2 carbon filters and a UV filter. That's good. Susie, do you want to taste?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Tastes like what you'd get from a crystal stream, I think. It's really nice.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying that. I'm very happy with this.
It tastes pure. That's the only way I can describe it.
Not that a creek would taste like this.
It tastes like a polluted river. No, it tastes
That's lovely.
clean and clear, and yeah, it tastes good. So there's a few more things. Now, because we're heading to a really, really remote area, we need to make sure we've got adequate communications to the outside world. And it's not only for emergencies, it's also to do things like check the weather forecast and see if there are any warnings for the track up ahead, see if there are any approaching storms, that sort of thing. So I've installed a Starlink unit, and at the moment I've got the well, let's go set it up and test it out. All right, so we actually found this bag from, was this from BCF?
Yes.
It's a TV bag. It perfectly fits a Starlink unit. It is fantastic. Okay, so here is my Starlink unit, and it's got a pipe bracket on the bottom and a bit of plastic PVC pipe, nice and lightweight. Put that into the bottom of the Starlink, and I've made another PVC pipe bracket in the bottom. I just slot this into it, and that's it. And I can now rotate this to face the right direction, and that's it. I can then plug in, I've got everything already connected in the car, so I just turn the power on and we've got internet. So that's about all the work that's been done to the car over the past 6 months. Some of the things I didn't mention is the shock absorbers, the BP51 shocks. 3 times now within a space of about a year they've developed a really nasty squeak, and ARB have replaced a portion of the shocks each time, and I think I've finally worked out what the solution is. They tell me that the shocks they need constant maintenance, so I need to get a high pressure hose, wash out the grit that builds up in the end of the shocks, and then spray liberally with lithium grease, which I've been doing, and that's been working. So I now carry a can of lithium grease in the car just as a matter of course. I have a new awning and new awning bag. So the awning itself is the same. The awning canvas has been replaced as a warranty replacement, so thank you Peak Off-Road and Alucab. And the new awning bag looks fantastic. It's a black Alucab bag. I really like that one. I've had the car serviced. I'm ready to go. The next thing is to prepare ourselves for the trip. So I've spent a lot of time preparing the vehicle for the upcoming trip, checking all the mods, making improvements, etc. But it's also important to prepare ourselves for the trip. Now, one of the ways is to arm ourselves with knowledge. Now, I'm camped at a property 3 hours south of Sydney that belongs to the Toyota Land Cruiser Club, of which I'm a member, and we are doing a training course over the next 2 days. It's all about advanced driving techniques and advanced recovery techniques, and this is super important for us because we tend to do a lot of solo travel, and so being able to get ourselves unstuck when we're hopelessly bogged is super important. So over the next 2 days we're going to absorb as much knowledge as possible about advanced recovery techniques.
Got the load.
It's coming over. Alright. Do we need to keep
Oh, we're right here.
You're talking to the radio. I can't quite hear you with the air car.
Sweet. Okay. And keep winching. It's about to come onto the strap. I got it. Okay. Keep going.
We have no pressure here, so we're fine.
Stop winching.
Thanks. Drive, Jack. Stopping 2 minutes. Stopping 1.
So now that we've done the advanced four-wheel driving and recovery course, I feel far more comfortable in heading off into one of Australia's most remote areas, and I can't wait. Now the car has had a service, so it's good for another 10,000 Ks, and the last thing left to do with the car is to have a four-wheel drive inspection done. Now, a four-wheel drive inspection place will specialise in inspecting your four-wheel drive. They are run by people who four-wheel drive themselves. They understand what goes wrong in a four-wheel drive, what are the important parts to inspect on a four-wheel drive, and they look at places or things in the car that a regular mechanic will overlook. So, about a year ago, before my last big trip, I went to a four-wheel drive inspection place. It cost me about $120, and it took about 2 hours. They actually discovered that I had some wear and tear on the bushes of my suspension. I then replaced them at relatively low cost, and the car is now perfect, and it was good for the trip. Had I not have taken it to that place, I would not have discovered the wear and tear in the bushes, and that could have ended up being a much larger repair bill. So it's a small amount of money to have peace of mind, and I'm really glad that I did that. So that's what's next for the car. Following that, the only thing left is to pack the car and hit the road, and I can't wait. Now, you can follow us live. So once we hit the road, there's a live map on forexadventures.com.au. I think it's under the Adventures section. Now, the map will become live once we hit the road, and you can see a dotted line and follow us as we progress on our trip. I also, as I've just mentioned, I've got Starlink fitted in the car, so we're going to try and do a live stream every few days as we can. If I can get the technology to work, I'm going to try and do a live stream to keep you up to date on how we progress on the trip. And last of all, stay tuned for the full series of this trip coming up once we get back. So stay safe, guys, and I shall see you on the road. Cheerio, guys.